Welcome to Expand Participation for Persons with Aphasia. My name is Bethany Diener. I'm a speech pathologist, and I've been providing AAC services for over 30 years. For the first 20 years of my career, I worked with a number of individuals, including those with aphasia, providing AAC services. In the last 13 years, I've been working with Tobii Dynavox. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you AAC strategies and tools that can be supported using both low and high technology. Before we move into those strategies and tools, let's just refresh our memories about what aphasia is. It's a language impairment that typically results from stroke. As a language impairment, it impacts areas that require language in order to be successful and functional. That would include expressive communication, understanding what other people say to you, as well as reading and writing. We know that people with aphasia may have only one of these issues or may have some combination. We also know that the severity of these issues can vary significantly. With this very heterogeneous group, what is it that draws them together? Well, it's the fact that each and every one of them want to return to the life that they had before. They want to be the person who was the parent and the friend and the grandparent and maybe an advocate or storyteller. AAC can help with that. It can help people with aphasia return to participation in life. Well, how does it do that? Back in 1990, Arlene Kratz said that AAC can do much more for people with aphasia than simply substitute for speech. It can also be a way of practicing speech so that it can be restored, as well as to cue or to supplement speech. So the idea that a person might open their communication book and look at a picture or something that's written there and it cues their speech. If that doesn't happen, they can use it as a means of substituting for their speech so that they can still participate. We also know that use of AAC by partners can be a support of understanding for people with aphasia and help them understand more about what's going on around them. People with aphasia can be either independent communicators or partner-dependent communicators. These terms were coined by Garrett and Lasker. An independent communicator is somebody who chooses their own AAC and uses it on their own. I knew a man named Roger who would come in with a backpack full of business cards and maps and brochures and his communication book and a notebook for writing. And he would go through there and pull out whatever it is that he possibly could to help us understand his communication. There are other people that don't have that ability. So we as partners may need to pull out the communication book or pull out the notebook or the business cards or the photo album or whatever it is that's needed to be able to communicate. So independent communicators and partner-dependent communicators can both use AAC. Today we're going to be talking about a number of AAC tools and strategies briefly. They are going to range from no tech, which means just being used, just the body is required, to high tech. The one thing that I want to point out before we go any further is that we know that for each person with aphasia, they are going to have different needs, skills, and their partners will be different. As a result, the augmentative and alternative communication tools and strategies that we provide also need to depend on those particular needs. So for some people, speech and no-tech strategies may be sufficient. For other people, they may need everything. It's not one size fits all for people with aphasia. So let's take a look at a few of these strategies that you can introduce and choose from. The first we're going to talk about are no-tech strategies. These include body language, pointing, and gestures. Body language and pointing are typically used very independently by people with aphasia. Gestures, on the other hand, are often very generic. They do things like this or like that, and they really don't have much meaning. So we want to encourage both partners and people with aphasia to use specific gestures. So instead of just going like this to refer to the remote control that they need, we teach them to use a gesture that has meaning. That gesture has to be specific to the person. If you have a tablet that you use to control your computer, this may be the gesture for you. We also want to make sure that they're producing key words in their sentences or in the things that they want to communicate. So for example, if someone's going to go to the eye doctor, we don't just want to say doctor, We might say eye doctor, so they get those key words and it enhances both their understanding, or if the person with aphasia is using it, it enhances our understanding. Let's move on now to some tools and strategies that can be used both in low-tech approaches and high-tech approaches. I'm going to be introducing them first in low-tech, and then I'll show you an app where you can provide these in a high-tech form. First is an instruction card. This may seem like a very simple thing, but it really does help people who aren't as familiar with the person with aphasia to understand what's going on. These cards can be very complex, as you see the one on the left here, where there's lots and lots of information. Or it can be quite simple, like the one you see here. The important things that need to be on it are what the communication challenge is, and then how the person can interact best. The amount of information that's on these depends on the need or the choice of the person with aphasia. Moving on, let's talk about drawing. Drawing is a very underused tool. Many people with aphasia are able to draw some really simple things, and it's a really wonderful way to communicate, both to understand when we use it, to enhance understanding, and also for expression. When we use drawing, it bypasses the language system. So we want to use it not for testing, like holding up this and saying, what is this? Draw it for me. We're not going to do that. We want to use it for real-life communication situations. We need to just push away the idea that, oh, well, I'm not a very good drawer. That's okay. Neither am I. But it's all about communication. And I'm going to show you some additional strategies in a moment through an example. The idea of asking for clarification, differentiating between who's drawing, and modeling techniques that clarify. You can use drawing with absolutely any tools you have available. Paper, dry erase boards, an app. So let's take a look at an example. This is from an article by Sackett. So you can see that on the right here is the transcript of what was being said between the therapist, who's CS, and the client, FM. The client, FM, has very little language. All he says basically through the whole thing is I, which means yes for him. But you can see that what they did here is they said FM, the client, is going to use a solid line. CS is going to use a dashed line. Did you notice those really specific gestures? So what happened over here is that FM was asked, what did you do this weekend? And he drew all of this. I don't know about you, but I don't know that I would quite understand what that is. So the therapist said, I see people here, I think. Are they people? And drew some people to clarify. That was correct. FM said yes. Then what happened is the therapist pointed to this and said, I see this, I'm not sure what it is. The client drew this, which clarified that it was a guitar. The therapist then went back and said, I also see something here. I'm not sure what this is. Notice the dashed line. FM drew this. The therapist said, I'm still not sure what that is. So FM drew this, which now the therapist knew that it was a piano. This is an example of clarifying who's drawing. It's also an example of clarifying who's drawing, but also clarifying details and making sure you ask for that, because often you can draw something more that will provide that information. This is another example, and this is using things like arrows to demonstrate action. It also uses a cartoon idea, the frames, so that the person with aphasia can provide more than just one bit of information, but actually tell a story. Drawing is a really powerful tool that we don't use often enough. Written choice techniques are very powerful for people with aphasia. They were first introduced by Garrett et al. In 1993. And I would start most of my sessions using written choice, especially with people with aphasia. I would start by asking the person what they wanted me to call them. So I would begin by writing down Mr. Brown, Joseph, Joe, and then I would put an option for other, because maybe he wants me to call him something else, Mr. B or something. I would then hand them the pen and ask them to circle the answer. What do you want me to call you, Mr. Brown, Joe or other, and he would circle. Okay, great, I'll call you Joe. So then I would say, I might want to ask just some small talk, and so I would ask, where do you live? I lived in Chicago at the time. Do you live in Chicago? Do you live in the suburbs? Or other? And again, I would ask them to circle their answer. Oh, you live in the suburbs. Okay. And then I would continue the interaction. And in this case, I might use some drawing. So I might go in and make a terrible drawing. This is Lake Michigan. Chicago is on Lake Michigan. This is one of the big buildings, and this is another big building in Chicago. And I would say, where do you live in Chicago? And the person might come in and be able to put a dot right up here. It says, you live on the north side of Chicago. So now I have some information, and we can continue like this. Written choice communication techniques are not to be used for quizzing. We need to use them for true conversation, and I've had some wonderful conversations with people using this technique. We need to write clearly and in a size the person can use. We always need to offer a none or other or something else option as a choice because we can't read people's minds. The number of choices you provide depends on the user's particular skills. Just like I did in the examples, you always want to review the information that you've written out auditorily as well as visually. So say each thing and point to each thing. You want to encourage pointing or circling rather than covering choices. Again, it's just much easier to see what they're pointing to. And again, we can use it in conjunction with other techniques. I had one situation where I had a woman who was very depressed after having had a stroke, and she had a very severe aphasia. And I would use this technique with her. And being a therapist, I got pretty good at asking questions. And so I learned a lot about her family. And one day her son came in, and I said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. Are you the son who's the attorney?" And he said, "How do you know that?" He thought I was a little crazy. And I said, "Oh, your mother told me." Again, he looked at me funny because he knew his mother wasn't able to speak. And he said, "How did you figure that out?" And I showed him this technique. And he picked this up and was able to have really wonderful conversations with his mother again using this interaction technique. And it wasn't about whether she got the answers right. It was just about connecting. Let's talk for a few minutes about scripts. These are used very commonly with people with aphasia to practice speech. They're also used to cue speech. The person will look at what's written and then possibly say it themselves. There is one more use of scripts that isn't used quite as often, and that's as a substitution for speech. The person with aphasia can turn that script toward the person they're interacting with and point to what's there, and their partner can read it. There's a lot of research about what makes up a script, but the key points are that it should be used for stories and for predictable interactions, like ordering food at a restaurant. We need to make sure that the language level in the script is appropriate for the person with aphasia, that they're not too long. Generally, you want a story to be about 8 to 10 sentences long, and for back and forth interactions, about 8 turns per person. Communication boards are commonly used for people with aphasia, and often they're made up of pages with categories of words like furniture or food or feelings. There are a few things I want to mention about communication books and boards. We can't just provide the communication book and board the same one to every person with aphasia. We want to make sure that they're customized based on the person's needs. Do they need single words? Do they need some full sentences like scripts? How much content is in the communication book? That depends on the needs of both the person with aphasia as well as their partner. In nursing facilities, many of the nurses and the aides don't have time to flip through an entire book. So maybe one page is good, and maybe the big book is saved for when the family comes in. The other thing we want to think about is how we represent the vocabulary in the book. There is a lot more that we can do than just category-based communication books and boards. We can add things like rating scales. Rating scales are commonly used in the world, and people with aphasia are often very familiar with these. But they can be used for a lot more than just rating pain. They can be used for opinions. What did you think of the movie we saw last night? Maybe the person points to the 2. Oh, you didn't think it was very good. You know what? I thought it was more like a 5. So this is a way of having a real interaction. The other thing you can do is make sure you're including information or pages in the book that are about areas of special interest for the person. So let's say it's someone who's knitted in their past, and now maybe they struggle to knit, but they still may want information about the things they knitted, the patterns they used, maybe even the wool that they used to knit. You could have things like a gardening journal that talks about the plants that they've had and that they've planted in their garden, or things about their family or trips they took. These types of special interest books and boards make a huge difference in the motivation of people with aphasia to use these systems. Visual scenes are context-based images. Many times in communication books, we use images like this. It just shows one thing. But a visual scene is something that looks more like what you see down here at the bottom. It usually shows people, it shows the context of what's going on. People with aphasia really benefit from this because often they have memories of those things, and it triggers a lot of language that may not be triggered by a picture that just shows one thing. It also gives a communication partner more information about what's going on, so they become a better partner, a more knowledgeable partner. These visual scenes can be used for wants and needs. You could take a picture of the person's refrigerator, the inside of it. You can also use it for sharing stories. So you could have pictures from a person's history or their schooling or work. The key here is that the person with aphasia should choose the images. Visual scenes can appear with more than just one on a page. So we could do something like this and then have not only a script about that particular activity, but also include things like questions. People with aphasia want to engage other people in interaction. So by providing questions in the communication, on the communication page, it can really be useful. In addition to category-based pages, or maybe even instead of, we might consider using topic-based pages. So for example, let's say somebody wants to go to the pub. Instead of having a page with all the drinks and a page with the sizes and a page with messages for the pub, maybe we combine that together. So we can have the things they like to drink. We can have the sizes. We can have messages that include things they commonly say, like, let's sit over there, or do you want another? These topic-based pages can be used for a number of purposes, and they're especially useful for social interactions and for personal stories and history. Just a quick word about keyboards. We often just provide the same type of keyboard for everyone, but we need to consider the person's experience. Some people have never used a computer or have very rarely used a computer, so typing is not a big thing for them. They would do better with an alphabetical keyboard. Just keep this in mind as you're providing a keyboard for people with aphasia. Now I want to share with you how many of these low-tech AAC tools and strategies can be provided in a high-tech form. The advantage of this high-tech form is that it provides all of the tools in one place. No papers are falling out, it's a lot faster to program, and it can be made available either on an iPad or on a Windows 10 tablet. What you're seeing right now is Snapscene. This is one of the visual scenes in the community topic. This is called the topic navigation bar. And right now we're in the community topic with scenes related to that topic. When I select home, I get home-related scenes. If I select tools, I get the tools that are within this topic. So going back to community, you can see in this visual scene, this is a picture of a menu, and some of the words on here are surrounded by dashed lines. These are hotspots. And below you see words related to that particular scene. When I go into this picture, it's a little harder to see, but down here you can see again these are hotspots that surround, in this case, lemons. You can draw hotspots around anything you want. When I select one of these hotspots, Snapseed will speak.
Porridge.
And it will say whatever I have recorded in. Snapseed uses recorded speech. The way that you draw a hotspot is by opening up edit mode, which is up here in the upper right-hand corner. And then you can pick continue. This opens up a set of tools that you can use for editing. When I work with people with aphasia, I tend to leave edit mode open because it gives the person with aphasia a way to edit on their own. They can learn to add hotspots, they can learn to add scenes, and that way Snapseed really becomes their own. So we talked about the idea of things like drawing and using written choice communication. When I go into my tools topic, the first thing on the list here is a whiteboard. And the way that I created this is simply by taking a picture of a white piece of paper. So I'm going to flip my camera so you'll see a piece of paper. And in this case, it's lined, but I can take a picture of that and pick accept. That's how I got that white piece of paper. So I'm going to go back up to my original whiteboard because it doesn't have lines on it. What I can do now is I can select draw right here, and I can draw pictures. I'm using my mouse, so it's not going to be very pretty. If I switch over to my finger, I can hit other things, and I can even draw or write with my finger. So this gives me a way of doing written choice communication, of drawing right here in Snapseed. Now I'm going to clear that and I can do something else. If I want a rating scale in Snapseed, I can make one on my computer. I can take a picture of that rating scale on the computer or that I've printed out, and now I can add hotspots to make this talk. So I'm going to select hotspot. I'm going to surround the word bad with a hotspot. I'm going to add a label. I don't have to add a label, but I will. I'm going to add bad, and then I'm going to record the sound. So I'm going to hit record, speak, and then hit stop. Bad. And now I'll hit this to play it. Bad. And then I hit done. And that's all there is to it, to adding scenes or adding hotspots to Snapseed. I could do that for the rest of these as well. If you have a communication board that you've made for someone, so this is a mealtime board, again, we do the same thing. We can select hotspot, draw around one of these, and then add a label and record the sound, and that hotspot will be there. One of the beauties of Snapseed is that you can add a variety of different tools. So if we look under this community topic that we had before, you might have noticed that you have two different scenes that are the same. This scene is a practice scene. So I can use this if I want to have the person practice different words of foods that they like to order for breakfast. So they can select and listen to it and then repeat after.
Bacon roll.
Bacon roll. Or maybe they can use this to cue their speech. So they can look at that and say, and try to get the word bacon roll out themselves. Now the second version of this is not a practice tool. This is a communication tool. Maybe when they go into their favorite breakfast spot, they order something different every day. So instead of putting hotspots around the different things on the menu, maybe the person points to what they want. What I can then do is go into my hotspot menu. I can select the hotspot and I can change the recording. So right now it says,
"Can I have a big breakfast with no baked beans, please?"
So now I can change that if I want to. So I'm going to hit the X and change this to, "I'd like a sausage roll, please." And so then when the person goes into when they go into the cafe, they can select this each day and order whatever it is that they particularly want. So you can see that this can be used as a way to practice or cue speech, as well as a substitution for speech, or as a way to communicate in a moment. One of the things that's really important in any AAC is that it really reflects the person. So you see here we've taken a photo of photographs, and you could have hotspots around the different people in each of these pictures. Or you could add a hotspot off to the side that maybe is a longer story about some of these pictures. Here's another example where this is a person who loves football, and so they've taken a picture of a really important match that they were excited about. So you could draw a hotspot around maybe something like this, and they can use that to say, England beat Germany, and I was so happy about it, or whatever it is that they want to say. So there's a variety of ways of using this. Notice here we have a map. This is a great tool. Maybe someone can explain where they live or where they're visiting or tell stories about it. So Snap Scene is an incredibly powerful tool. If I want to add a scene, it's really simple. I just select one of the pluses, either on top of the topic navigation bar if I want to add a topic, or on top of the camera if I want to add a picture, a scene. I can hit the camera. I can take a photo. In my case right now, because I'm recording this webinar, I'm going to have to flip my camera to take a picture of what's behind my computer. I could take a photo and I can accept it. I can also pick a photo that I already have stored on my device. So I'm going to select accept, and that's my really horrible scene. But it gives you an idea of how simple it is to add images to Snap Scene. This is an incredibly powerful tool because it gives you a way of accommodating things like written choice, drawing, rating scales, a variety of types of communication boards. You can add topical or categorical communication boards. You can add topics of interest like we talked about. So there's all sorts of things that you can do with Snap Scene and keep everything in one place. We know that for people with aphasia, the AAC tools and strategies that we pick are important. But sometimes what really stands in the way of use of AAC are the beliefs that either the person with aphasia holds or that their partners hold, or perhaps that we hold ourselves. That AAC is giving up on speech. That we should try everything else before we introduce AAC. As a result of this, we often don't introduce AAC until the very last session before the person leaves. That doesn't give us any time to teach its use, and that means most likely it's not going to be used. That AAC will keep someone from talking. That AAC is only used as a substitute for speech, as opposed to what we know, which is that it can be a means of practice as well as cueing. That only people with disabilities use AAC. The fact of the matter is that you and I use AAC all day, every day. We use gestures as we talk. We point to things in the environment. We point to photographs on our phone. We draw maps. We write out messages. All of those things are AAC. We use them all day, every day. When we introduce them to someone with aphasia, we can say, you're going to use these when you need them, just like we do. You might use them a little more while you're still working on your speech. You can't work on AAC and speech at the same time. Many therapists believe this, but the fact is that, again, if you can use AAC tools as a means of practice, like reading the words on a communication board, or naming the pictures, or pointing to named pictures, as well as using it to substitute for speech, if we use things like written choice and drawing during our sessions as a normal part, just to say, or rating scales, how is this activity for you? And they can rate it on the rating scale. All of these things can be used during our sessions, and the partner and the person with aphasia can learn them and use them themselves. Finally, many people believe that people with aphasia are never successful with AAC. That just isn't true. There are many people that use AAC and benefit highly from it to return to participation in their lives. On mytobiidynavox.com, there's a lot of free information, including some articles about the myths that I mentioned, articles at a glance about how AAC can be used for people with aphasia, as well as a lot of other free resources. I would encourage you to take a look at those. I want to leave you with just a few key thoughts. First, focus on restoration and compensation in your sessions. Make sure you're using AAC from the start and show that it's a natural part of communication. Make sure you're using AAC for conversing as much as possible. The person with aphasia should be part of creating and choosing the AAC systems that they use. This is going to make them far more effective. And finally, train communication partners using adult learning techniques. Demonstrate techniques, have them demonstrate them back, and most importantly, teach techniques based on their need. When your session starts, ask the partner and the person with aphasia, what was hard this week? And give them strategies to address that. They are going to learn those because there's a need. I want to end by highlighting our role in implementing AAC tools and strategies for persons with aphasia. An eager and confident attitude toward a multimodal communication approach is necessary to foster enthusiasm in people with neurological impairments and maybe to an even greater extent their family members and caregivers. Education on the benefit of all forms of compensation which assist in bridging the gap between function and desired outcome is vital to AAC acceptance and program success. I encourage you to explore more of these AAC tools and strategies and implement them with the people with aphasia that you see. Thank you.